Okay, Council, it is 2 o'clock, so we will call to order our regular meeting of Council. We'll start by recognizing that we are holding our meeting on the unceded territories of the Hukajesset and Sishot First Nations. Council, are there any late items to add to the agenda? Seeing none, any late items from the Director of Corporate Services?
Yes, Madam Mayor, we have correspondence as it relates to item F3, Development Variance Permit number 104 from Mrs. B. Shear.
Okay, that's great, thank you. And there's a note here that says Mayor Minions to invite the Director of Corporate Services to speak to a matter of procedure.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just briefly, Council is aware that we remain under the Ministerial Order number 192, which prevents the public from attending meetings in person. As we continue to conduct meetings of Council virtually, it has led to both Council and the staff adjusting processes and procedures when conducting meetings and continuing to engage the public in a meaningful manner. Although members of the public are able to participate virtually, the public tend to submit their comments and questions electronically, and then which are read out by myself, the corporate officer. Council's procedure bylaw, as it relates to question period, states the following. Council members shall provide time to answer inquiries from the media and any member of the public on any topic of relevance to the city. If an answer cannot immediately be provided, the chair shall provide a response at the next meeting. The chair shall determine, if necessary, when sufficient discussion has taken place. So in light of the order remaining in effect, staff are proposing that, similar to how questions were captured and responded to during the financial planning process, that moving forward, the Corporate Services Department propose a similar method to be used to compile questions received by the public while council meetings continue to be held in the virtual forum. So a Q&A will be created with staff tracking questions received during the question period. Staff will then populate the document with responses. The tracking document will be included in Council's regular meeting agenda package on a monthly basis, and it will serve as a means of those individuals who have asked questions to receive and view responses from staff. And it's just suggested to approach it this way rather than providing further staff reports, and it might just capture in a very succinct method those that are submitting questions for responses. Oh,
I muted myself. Thank you very much for that. With that, would somebody like to move approval of our agenda?
So moved.
By Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Kuhn. Seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried, thank you. Okay, we will move on to adoption of minutes, and we have minutes from the special meeting held at 10:30 a.m. and the regular meeting held at 2 p.m. on April 26th, 2021. Somebody like
Motion
to adopt? Move to adopt by Helen. Seconded by Councillor Washington. Seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried, thank you. And public input period, which of course is an opportunity for the public to submit input on topics of relevance to City Council. Twyla, did we have any pieces of input?
no input at this time.
Thank you. Then we will move on to our delegations. We have 2 delegations today, and the first one is Corey from MNP Chartered Accountants in attendance to present the audited financial statements for the year of 2020. Welcome, Corey. I will pass it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Minions. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. I'm going to attempt to share screen, so bear with me if I can make the technology work. There we go. Hopefully everybody can see that first slide now. Just trying to get it right. There we go. Now I can see everybody. So happy to say that we're all wrapped up on the audit, ready to sign off. The last step here is to present to council and answer any questions. I'll take you through your financial results for 2020, talk a little bit about the audit and the audit process, and then happy to take those questions at the end. So a reminder that what you're seeing here in these financial statements is consolidated. The operating funds, the capital, the reserve. When you're getting some of your reporting throughout the year from your staff, you might be just looking at specific areas of operating funds or capital projects. When we put together the when your staff puts together the financial statements, they're putting it all together into one package. So your balance sheet or your statement of financial position at December 31st, 2020, you can see cash and investments at $37.4 million, down about $1 million from the prior year. Total financial assets, so cash, accounts receivable, things that you could convert into cash, investments, was $45.5 million. The debt being carried by the city is being paid down on schedule. It's down from 14.2 to 13.9 million. And total liabilities are also down from the prior year at 27.5 million. So if you take those total liabilities and subtract them off from the total financial asset number, you get what we call the net financial asset figure of 18,049,000, about 700,000 lower than the prior year. And then the tangible capital asset, the big number on the balance sheet. So the physical assets, roads, water, sewer, all the infrastructure, buildings and equipment and things is on the books at 132,151,000. You can see almost a $10 million increase. So some capital activity, some big capital projects throughout 2020, and the accumulated surplus at the end of the year and the bottom of the statement of just shy of 151 million. I'll get into what's in that number in a future slide. Moving then to the income statement, the statement of operations for 2020. So you can see total revenues of 45.6, lower than the prior year's 48.2. There was some significant capital grant funding coming through in 2019. And so not as much of that in 2020, offset by the provincial restart grant, which came through in November. The total expenses for the year, fairly consistent year over year at 36.6 million, just a small increase from the prior year. So an annual surplus on an accounting basis, just shy of $9 million. I will show you what happened with the cash flows in a future slide. That's more in line with how you're thinking when you're doing your budgeting process, is that cash flow basis. There are lots of adjustments to get to these accounting annual surplus here on this slide. So the cash flow basis, then you can see that operations of the city brought in 10.8 million. There are capital purchases of 13.5 million, and you can see there, as I mentioned, there was more capital grant funding in 2019 and more capital grant spending in 2019 to go along with that. On the investing side, there's $3.9 million pulled out of some of the investment accounts and into the main cash accounts to pay for some of these capital projects. And then the financing, 254,000 is net of any new loans and the pay down of long-term debt during the year. So the net cash inflow of about just shy of $1 million into the main bank accounts. Remember the cash and investments, if you add those two together, they actually went down for the year because of the significant capital projects going on. I promise I'd tell you what's in this big $150 million number. The biggest number is this, what we call equity and capital assets. So this is the value on the books of all the tangible capital assets minus the debt that the city is paying off. That's 118 million. Then you get $33 million set aside in reserves for future projects. And then you get the operating fund, 23.3 million deficit and $22.3 million capital fund on the positive. Again, these are fairly close to offsetting, only about $1 million difference there. Moving then out of the financial statements, into the audit, we are happy to be able to provide what we call an unqualified audit opinion. So that is auditor speak for a clean audit. We are satisfied that your financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects and in accordance with the appropriate accounting standards for local governments. Ready to sign our report after council approving the financial statements today. We wrapped up all the other minor outstanding matters this morning. Usually that's getting a few legal letters and things coming back. So we've got everything we need and just council approval being the last step. Our audit process, these are your financial statements, your staff puts them together. We look at the numbers, get ourselves comfortable that they are accurate. We start by looking at the controls in place at the city to make sure you're getting accurate financial reporting. And we sample transactions throughout the year. To do that sampling, we calculate what we call a materiality number. And it's usually about 4% of your annual revenues. So for 2020, it's $1.5 million. So we look at every transaction that's over that threshold, and then we sample underneath enough volume of transactions and accounting entries to give ourselves comfort that your financial statements are accurate. So during the audit this year, we didn't find anything unusual, no irregularities, nothing to bring to council's attention. We are not specifically fraud investigators when it comes to a financial statement audit, but if anything came up, it would be required to bring it to council's attention here today. And a big thank you to Andrew and Rosalind and all the staff, not just in finance. We do ask some of the other departments questions. A very smooth audit process, and we really want to thank them for all their help this year. We do confirm that we're independent with respect to the city, right from the beginning of the year, beginning of January 1st, 2020, all the way through to May 10th, 2021, today's date. We didn't do any other projects or any other work that would impair our ability to give you an independent audit opinion. And shifting again away from some of the audit discussion, we started by looking at 2020 and the snapshot of that 1 year. We know that 2020 is a very interesting year with the pandemic and everything going on. So we like to end on looking at some ratios and trends on a bit of a longer time frame. So we're looking at the last 4 to 5 years to give you an idea of where some ratios and where some things are trending with the city. We start by looking at this ratio that we call a sustainability ratio. So we're looking at comparing your financial assets to your total liabilities. The key number here is the number 1. If you're over the number 1, you've got funds put aside, you've got reserves, financial resources available to pay for future projects. If you start dipping below 1, it means you are taxing or raising rates in the future to pay for past activity. So for the city, it's currently 1.7. It's been declining slowly from about 2.1 in 2017 as you take on more debt and some of those large capital projects that needed to be done. At 1.7 in and of itself, that's not a scary ratio to be at. Most of the communities that we work with are somewhere between 1 and 2. It's kind of a sweet spot for managing your debt levels and tax rates and things. But we do know that this number has been dropping for a little bit as some of the debt has been incurred over the last few years. The next ratio we look at is flexibility. So we look at the infrastructure, the capital assets that the city is carrying. We look at the depreciated value. So you've got it on the books at what you paid for some of those assets. There's depreciation charge to estimate the usage over time. So then we compare that depreciated value to the original cost as a rough measure of age. Again, this is not a full asset management look at it. This doesn't take into account any wear and tear on assets or what it might cost to replace them. But for the city, this ratio is about 53.9%, up a little bit from the prior year's 52.9. This ratio has been trending upward since 2018. So it was about just shy of 51% 3 years ago. So what that means, and as you can see, it sounds like a broken record sometimes, significant capital spending in the last few years on some of the projects that needed that time and attention. And so this number has been climbing. So that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions about the financial statements for the audit and the audit process.
Thank you very much, Corey. That was great. Councillor Paulson.
I'm not sure if this should go to Corey or Andrew, but on page 23, I'm just looking for some clarification. Page 23 of the agenda, and there is under accounts receivable, there's a general listing there. And I noticed that value has increased by, it looks like just under $2 million. I'm just wondering what that general account consists of, and where the $2 million, roughly $2 million increase in receivables came from.
Thank you. And I'm just looking at, I see where you're, note 4 accounts receivable.
Yeah.
See some detail.
I always like to know what general account means.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, I can tell you exactly which account number it is, but not the description on it or the why. There's one large increase, 2.1 million this year and only 330 last year. So Andrew, if you're on and have that at hand, it is just sitting in that one account, but I don't have the detail of what's in that number.
Madam Mayor, I think what I can do is I can get the answer. I'll just have to dig it out here, and it'll take me a second.
Sounds
Or you
good.
can bring it forward. You can bring it forward later too.
Great.
I stumped them, Madam Mayor. I stumped them.
Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When I look at your ratios for sustainability and flexibility, are these sending up any red flags to you because they're trending the wrong way? Or is there anything that should be watching in the future years coming up, or are we kind of in that normal range?
Thank you, Councillor. Great question. The first one with the financial assets to liabilities, so that sort of liquidity ratio, that's definitely one to keep an eye on. It is trending down, but interesting enough, those two are interrelated. The financial assets one and the capital assets. The reason that the first one is declining is because of significant capital projects over the last few years, and the capital ratio is improving. So there's a fine balance there. The real tricky situation, or when you start getting really close to that magic number of 1 or dipping below it, that's where you find yourself in tough, because now you're having to raise taxes or user rates to pay for something that happened last year. And that's a harder thing to sell. But there's a fine balance of how much do we put aside for future projects versus passing it off to next year's taxpayer. So keeping an eye on that one, knowing that it all has to build up into your 5-year plan and what capital things are coming down the pipeline. It's not uncommon for us with some of the communities on the island to see that type of scenario, because there's fair amounts of significant old infrastructure that need attention, and there are grant fundings available, but the reality is that some of it is going to be debt financed because you can't grant fund everything.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions from council? Okay, Corey, just want to thank you for the presentation. Very helpful to see, and just to hear the number of measures that we should be watching is really helpful. Infrastructure renewal has been a huge priority for us over the last few years, and certainly saving for infrastructure. But as you noted, a lot of our larger projects do have to be financed with borrowing. So it's always nice to know kind of which metrics we should be watching for that. So thank you for that. Council, would somebody like to make the motion as written? Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, I move Corey Vanderhorst and Lois Blomer to, oh, no, that's the wrong one. Sorry. I'll move that the auditor's report and the 2020 audited financial statements prepared by MNP Chartered Accountants be received and approved as presented.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Poon. Any final questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? None opposed, carried. Thank you very much. Thanks again, Corey, appreciate it. Okay, we will move on to our second delegation. We have Bob Brash of the Truck Loggers Association to present on current issues surrounding the working forests and old growth harvesting. And I think Bob is just connecting to audio. Bob, can you hear us?
Yeah, just unmuted.
Wonderful, thanks so much. Thank you for coming, and I will just pass it over to you. We usually give our delegations up to 10 minutes, and then we'll have time for questions after that as well.
Okay, well, I guess the first thing will be prove my technical competence or incompetence here. So gonna try to share the screen here, folks.
Screen share always is the test. Got it, thank you.
Oh, are you guys looking at it then? Good, perfect, thank you. Okay, well, I guess first of all, my appreciation for you making some time for us to chat today. I guess I wanted to just sort of do my best to inform you of some of the things that Truck Loggers is up to these days, and at the end of the day, I guess where we could possibly cooperate together. And obviously, forestry has lots of issues going on these days, so it's a challenging time for sure. So next slide, and you tell me if it goes properly. So the role of the Truck Loggers, we've been around for 78 years now, 500 members across BC, including 20 community members, which you're one of, so thank you. And currently about 20 members in Port Alberni.
We are still on that first slide.
Oh, are you? Okay.
You don't have it in slideshow, Bob.
Yeah, darn, let me see this thing. See, good thing I got some experts working for me there. So
there we go. Perfect,
okay.
thank you.
And then, so our slide number 2, I guess now, hopefully. So we work with the provincial government, obviously, on policies and regulations affecting the forest sector. Obviously, we work towards improving the overall prosperity of the industry. When the tide rises, all boats rise kind of thing. We are quite a strong voice in the forest industry, especially with the government in terms of policy. We're obviously concerned about long-term sustainability of those working in the forest sector. And we have quite a strong forest education and scholarship program through our donor fund. Who do we work with? Provincial government, major licensees, labor, the value-added sector, the BC First Nations Forestry Council, the BC Forest Safety Council, WorkSafe BC, and the other major forest-related associations in our province. Our challenges moving ahead, as we see them anyway, is the overall investment climate in BC's forest sector. Right now, we've got booming times. I'm sure you've all read and experienced going to Home Depot or wherever your hardware store is for a 2x4 and the prices that have shot up. But those are cycles. And I think what we're all concerned about is the long-term sort of investment climate in British Columbia right now. And there are lots of factors saying that it's probably not the best investment climate on the long term in BC. And so certain changes have to be made to improve that. There's the long-term certainty of the working forest. And I have another slide right after this that I'll talk about quickly. We have to look at reducing our overall cost structures and complexity. We are a high cost producer in the world. And as I think you folks are acutely aware with the strength of the industry in Port Alberni, we have to remain competitive. I used to be a government employee, a district manager, so I'm fairly familiar with the regulatory environment that we deal with, and that can be challenging also. So if there's ways that we can find to reduce that complexity, that'd be a great thing. There are some challenges, especially with recent headlines about trying to inform everybody about the forest sector, what it's all about in a very sort of agnostic type way, just to tell people what this industry actually does and how important it is to BC's economy. And then lastly, the challenge moving ahead is creating a collective vision for the forest industry. I'll talk about that a bit right now. The working forest and old growth. I could spend a bunch of time, but I don't have it, but I could spend a bunch of time flooding you with data and opinions about the forest sector and what should be done moving ahead. And there's lots of data out there and there's lots of opinions. But really, when you start asking yourself, who's talking to who right now in terms of this industry and where we should be moving it forward? And I think we might have all seen some videos lately where the dialogue wasn't exactly the most comfortable between folks with different opinions. And harvesting isn't always, but it seems to be portrayed this way, as a yes or no proposition. There's all kinds of forestry sort of strategies we can use to sort of try to have our proverbial cake and eat it too, if that makes sense. The economic contributions of forestry remain significant. And again, I could rattle off all kinds of figures, but I think we're running about $300 a cubic meter. So every logging truck that goes down your road contributes probably $15,000 to $20,000 plus or minus into the GDP of our province after it's all said and done. So we say that there's got to be some kind of work done on a vision for BC's working forest in the forest sector, but that's got to be done collaboratively with the people of many different opinions. And while we're all awaiting for this intentions document to come out from the government that was sort of announced by the Premier at the recent Kofi convention, we just don't see a whole lot of talking going on between parties right now, which is unfortunate. We support change, but obviously we have our biases and want it to be the right changes. So it's opportunities for collaboration and cooperation. We can give you lots of information about the forest sector in your area and in your region, payrolls, employees. We can assist in public education information. We can assist and coordinate with you for any issues about forest policy, review and development. We can obviously work together in any advocacy efforts with federal and provincial governments. And then lastly, as I sound like a broken record, I'm sure, is work towards a collective vision for how we improve our forest sector, its prosperity, and making sure that resource communities stay healthy. And the last slide, I won't talk about this too much other than we have lots of ways that we get the word out to our membership between magazines and social media and grapple yarders and of course, a convention that we'd love to see happen again. It's in January every year. Last year was the first time in the history of the Truck Loggers Association that the convention was canceled. So that's unfortunate. So hopefully that ends soon. So that's my end of my presentation. So I'll stop the share here and hopefully that works. There we go.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation, Bob. Council, are there questions? Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Bob, obviously Fairy Creek's been in the headlines a lot lately, and it's frustrating me to no end that the ministry, and being a former ministry employee, isn't really telling, I'm not saying not telling the truth, but not telling us what that Fairy Creek watershed's going to look like. I suspect that the vast majority of it will never be logged, and a lot of it, there will be old growth management areas. There will be areas along the stream that will be saved. What can you tell us about the Fairy Creek watershed?
A little bit. Obviously it's not my sort of intimate operating area, but there was a really good report done by Resource Works. If you go on their website. And their executive director did a real good report on the extent of harvesting that's being proposed in the area. And I know this is a generalization, but I don't think the picture painted by some opposed to what's happening in Fairy Creek is even close to, in reality, what's actually going to happen there. And I would ask each one of you, if you have time, to sort of go and look at that report. It's on their website, and I think it might be pretty informative, and it's more along with the lines of you just said, Councillor. So.
And if I could, Madam Mayor, one other question. At the Kofi convention and at a number of other venues that I've participated in, there's talk about mass timber and the need for it. Yet you'll see the CEOs from the large companies on panels talk about mass timber, but they're not doing anything about it. How do we get the big forest companies to start producing mass timber? Could it be as simple as the more value you add to the wood, the less stumpage you pay?
That could be one part of it, but I think you still, well, where do you start answering this question? Because the whole stumpage question is a huge question also. And and how tenure should be divvied up and the whole bit. Because I mean, if you look at the GDP contribution or the taxes in one form or another that come to the province and the federal governments and municipalities, it's probably about $4 billion on an annual basis. And I don't even know what the total stumpage payments these days are, but it's not even close to that. It's a few $100 million. So there's ample opportunity to sort of look at that stumpage system. But back to mass timber. I think it's a great opportunity. I've personally had tons of interest in that since day one. But the interesting part is BC will only support, pick a number, 3, 4, 5 sort of mass timber factories in the province. It's not going to consume all of the lumber we produce. It's going to produce a fair amount. There's only so much that the market can absorb at any one time. And we have, again, lots of competitors across Canada and competitors in the States that are building factories as we speak. So I guess we better get on the bandwagon sooner than later. So.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was at a workshop once on forestry, and they said that they had no clear definition of exactly what old growth timber was. Has anybody ever come up with a very clear explanation or definition of exactly what old growth is?
Yeah, I think it hides out there in the various publications by the ministry. And there's a very technical classification that they come up with, age classes, and you'll see it on the forest cover maps and all that kind of stuff. So there is a technical classification for it, but there's also a bigger problem, and that's what people's perception of old growth is. Some people look at Cathedral Grove, and that's what old growth is everywhere in the province. Other people know that, you know, we've got swampy areas that can have old growth that's 250 years old and it's 10 feet high. So there's all kinds of variation in what old growth actually is, and then there's also tons of variation in what its actual value is to other resource values. And I know this is a very much a simplification, but obviously the valley bottom sites that, you know, were frankly historically logged out pretty quickly in the old days, they tended to have the most resource values, other resource values. And so that's probably where a lot of the conflict is right now. And that's going to be the challenge for us to overcome. Don't by the way, misinterpret me. There's side slopes, for instance, that have critical habitat for marble murrelets and other type things. But yeah, so I don't have the perfect answer for you, but there is a technical definition, but I think it's a bigger problem about what actually people perceive it to be.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, well, Bob, I want to thank you for coming today. It's always helpful to hear an update from the TLA, and we typically like to attend the conference as well, although I will note that the last conference, although 2020 was canceled, 2019 was in a building with no heat and a leaking roof. So we hope that the next one will be an improvement from that. It was very cold in January in that hotel where the heat wasn't working. But do just want to thank your organization for the advocacy work that you do. It is important to hear, you know, all sides and all angles, and just appreciate your thoughtful approach to some of these very challenging issues. So looking forward to another opportunity to connect soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, Council, and we'll work on the heat. So.
Okay, Council, we will move on to no unfinished business today. So staff reports. Item number 1 is accounts. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the certification of the Director of Finance dated May 10, 2021 be received and checks numbered 148430 to 148488 inclusive and payments totaling $657,131.36 be approved.
Second.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Poon. All in favor? Carried. And item 2 from the Manager of Operations, we have sewer connection and bylaw and regulation bylaws.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This report is in response to a member of the public raising concerns regarding BC Transit fleet vehicle washing. In particular, the potential for contaminants related to vehicle washing entering the receiving environment via the storm water collection system. BC Transit's fleet vehicle washing practices are compliant with provisions of the current sewer bylaw. BC Transit has voluntarily installed a filtering system to filter some potential contaminants, but during periods of heavy rainfall and without diligent management, the filtering system can result in water backing up on the surface for some temporary flooding. There's one catch basin that's affected by this. The city's current fleet vehicle washing practices don't differ substantially from those of BC Transit. So it is recommended that as a next step in considering this issue, council direct that the city's bylaws be reviewed and recommendations for revision be made for council's consideration.
Okay, thank you very much. Council, are there questions? Okay, seeing no questions, would somebody like to make the motion that's written? Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move that council direct staff to review the city sewer connection and regulation bylaw and propose for council's consideration amendments that address collection and treatment of potential contaminants in a manner that reflects best practices and applicable federal and provincial regulations and guidelines.
Second.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Poon. Any comments? Okay, I just want to thank the member of the public who brought this concern forward. I know it took a bit longer for us to get to it than, or for council to receive the information and give direction than she had intended, but I think it's always helpful when members of the public do bring forward concerns like this. And I'm happy that the recommendation is to do a review of that bylaw and make sure that we are conducting ourselves as we want to. So with that, I will call the question on the motion. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thanks so much. And we'll move on to item number 3 from the development planner. We have development permit number 20-03 and development variance permit number 104 for 3500 Anderson Avenue. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Before council for consideration is a combined development permit and development variance permit for 3500 Anderson Avenue. The applicant is Cormac Linehan on behalf of VRS Communities, and they're proposing to construct and operate a multifamily residential building on the property. The building would provide 102 units of seniors housing, and it represents the next phase of development on the Alberni District Secondary School site. The applicant is also requesting a variance to building height in order to allow an additional story, and they're also requesting a reduced setback at the east side of the property for a minor encroachment. The property is currently zoned RM3, and it's within the multifamily development permit area of the OCP, which is why it requires a development permit. And the lot is 2.5 acres and was recently subdivided from the mother parcel of 4000 Bird Street. And the building will cover approximately 25% of the site. In general, the overall design and landscaping do reflect a really modern, high quality development. And the apartment building itself will be L-shaped with 5 stories and 102 dwelling units. But the building also has a smaller 1.5 story section that'll function as a multi-purpose common space for residents. And the form and character of the building is typical for multifamily development with exterior materials like cement fiber siding, but it also includes a lot of wood features such as soffits, beams, and columns. The city's design guidelines for residential multifamily development really do emphasize heavy landscaping in developments like this to reduce the impact on neighboring properties and improve livability for residents. And the applicant has really considered this in their design, especially in the way they've provided trees and shrub beds along the property lines, trees along Anderson Avenue, and also within the parking lots and all those outdoor common areas. In terms of vehicle access, there'll be 2 driveways off of Anderson Avenue. There's the south access, which will lead to the main parking lot, and the north access, which will lead to a smaller lot and additional parking. But altogether, we're looking at about 85 parking stalls that'll be provided on site. And this is significantly more than the 45 stalls that's actually required by the zoning bylaw. With regards to the development variance permit, they are requesting that increase from 4 to 5 stories and an increase in height from about 14 meters to 16.2 meters. So just over 2 meters in difference. Staff really don't perceive these variances to have any additional negative impact on the surrounding neighborhood. And this is largely because of the terrain and the way the buildings are sited on the property. The 5-story portion of the building will be set back significantly from the street towards the middle of the property. And it's actually the 1.5-story section that will front onto Anderson Avenue. So those 1- and 2-story houses on Anderson Avenue won't be looking directly up at a 5-story building. There will be a more gradual transition there. Likewise, the impact of an additional story on the properties to the east will be minimal because of the significant difference in elevation and the existing tree line that exists on the ridge. The applicant is also proposing to reduce the minimum side yard setback from 5 meters to 3.8 meters to accommodate a balcony support column that's making a minor encroachment into the setback area. But just to clarify, the foundation of the building itself is still outside the required setback area, and staff don't expect this variance will have any impact on the surrounding properties or on future development. So to summarize, issuing these permits will enable the applicant to proceed with building a 5-story apartment building with 102 units of seniors housing at 3500 Anderson Avenue, and the development proposal meets the permit area guidelines in the OCP. And if the variances are approved, the proposal will also meet the requirements of the zoning bylaw. So council's options include proceeding with issuance of the variance of the development permit and the development variance permit, not proceeding with issuance of the permits or requesting revisions from the applicant, or providing alternative direction to staff. And the planning department supports the issuance of the development permit and the development variance permit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian. Councillor Poon.
Well, I just want to say, wow, what a exciting development in our community, and so happy to see that we have this level of investment within our community. And I feel like we're really turning a page in Port Alberni. An exciting time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm very pleased to see this project coming forward to council. We recently had a housing needs assessment done for our community, and it was identified that there are many seniors where there's 1 or 2 people living in a 3 or 4 bedroom house, but really they have nowhere to go if they decide to sell their home. So this will give them an opportunity to move in a nice apartments. And what that will do is it'll open up some housing for that missing middle piece for young families that we so desperately need in our community. And this development will also provide some social interaction for seniors as well. It's noted, or it's commonly known, that loneliness is one of the biggest factors in the health of seniors. So it's just a win-win-win for everybody. So I'm very excited to see this coming forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Solda.
Interesting. I think it's great. And the reason is I know many people who are elderly and they want to move and they can't sell their house because they have no place to move. And then there are those who have sold their house and they have nowhere to go. So this is great. I think this is a great thing for Port Alberni. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, Councillor Washington, would you like to read the motions as written?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the City Council authorize the issuance of development permit number 20-03 and the Director of Corporate Services be authorized to sign the permit, including development plans prepared by NSDA architects shown in Schedule B titled Timberline at North Park and dated March 22, 2021.
Second.
Thank you very much. Moved by Councillor Paulson, seconded by Councillor Poon. On the motion to issue the development variance permit, any final questions? Seeing none, sorry, the development permit. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And Dan, if you want to continue to item number 2.
Thank you. So the city authorized the assurance of development variance permit number 104 to vary zoning bylaw 4832 for the property located at 3500 Anderson Avenue and legally described as Lot 1, District Lot 46, Alberni District Plan, EPP 105328, PID 031 362 and 389 as follows. A, vary section 5.6.2 site development regulations to increase the maximum height of the principal building from 14.0 meters to 16.2 meters a variance of 2.2 meters. B, section 5.16.2, site development regulations to increase the maximum stories of the principal building from 4 stories to a 5-story, a variance of 1 story. And C, variance section 5.16.2, site development regulations to reduce the minimum size of the yard setback from 5 meters to 3.8 meters, a variance of 1.2 meters.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded
Second,
by
Madam Mayor.
Councillor Paulson. And Twyla, did you have any comment?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I just want to draw council's attention to the late correspondence that was submitted. And if council doesn't mind, I'll just quickly read that out prior to voting on the motions. And it was a letter addressed to Mayor and Council about vehicle density should be addressed before any approval for multifamily residential being considered. Parking along Anderson Avenue is already a problem since the 2 Broad Street buildings have been occupied, and adequate parking needs need to be planned before any further development is considered. The letter writer comments that her garage and driveway back onto Anderson, and there's already challenges with the amount of traffic. And from her perspective, safety concerns for all residents with driveway access on Anderson. She notes that realized comments don't specifically address the variances that are being requested, but feels that traffic problems are rectified, that she cannot support an additional story on the proposed building, which will result in more units and more traffic and more parking problems.
Thank you very much. Council, are there any questions or comments on the letter? Okay. Oh, Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just so we're clear, they were talking about something in the neighborhood of 85 parking spots. Is that correct? And in fact, they really only need 45. Is that what I heard?
Yeah.
Brian?
Yes, Madam Mayor, that's correct. They're proposing 85 stalls, but the way that our zoning bylaw calculates parking, they are only required to provide 45.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Solda.
Curious, how different is it from ADSS when it was there? They had a lot of students with cars and they were parking on side streets as well as their own parking lots. Isn't it very similar, or would we suggest this is more? And of course, my biggest issue on the whole thing is that stop sign, you know, where everybody wanted a light at one point. So somewhere along the line, I hope that gets addressed.
I'm not sure if we would have the information to compare in any accurate way ADSS compared to now with number of vehicles. Likely not on hand. And Councillor Solda, do you want to specify which stop sign area you're speaking of? Is it 10th and Bird or a different area?
That's correct, 10th and Bird.
10th and Bird, okay. Brian or Scott, not sure if you're able to just speak to the traffic study that was done previously, and if there are any recommendations or steps for moving forward. You could always have that information at a future meeting if needed as well. Brian.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I think I just want to stress that the applicants have really gone above and beyond in meeting their obligation to provide parking under the development permit. So the traffic study was at rezoning, which is quite some time ago, and it's really not applicable to the approval of the development permit at this stage right now. But so far, the applicants have met their obligations in terms of the development on their property. Scott, the director, may wish to comment as well, though.
Sure, I think I can just give some general comments. I suspect, you know, the difference between the high school and what you're going to see going forward as high density multifamily is the high school had intense times of traffic in the morning and when school let out. Where, well, you will see the residential, it's going to be more frequent traffic throughout the day, just as normal residential would be. There will be, although not relevant to what is in front of council now, there will be continued improvements to Anderson Avenue as these developments proceed. You know, some street improvements, full sidewalk, you know, along there, just to give council some indication.
Thank you very much. Any additional questions from council? Okay, seeing none, then on the motion as written, all in favor? Carried. Any opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item number 4 from the Director of Engineering and Public Works, we have the award of the Coal Creek Sewer Separation Project.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll keep this fairly quick. The city tendered the Coal Creek Sewer Separation Project and received 6 bids. We are requesting council approval to award to the lowest bidder, Luco, for approximately 1.7 million, which is within the budget that was approved by council.
Excellent. Any questions from council? Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is, do we have some kind of local procurement policy? I noticed the second bidder in this case is local, and probably, I don't have my calculator in front of me, but about 5% difference possibly.
Tim, do you want to speak to the policy?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Director of Finance is probably best situated to speak to the purchasing policy.
So, Madam Mayor, with the purchasing policy, the selection for the tender is provided and evaluated, and based on the bids that were received, the award is directed to Luco. So, with that, there is contract law that's involved, and when you tender a project, the criteria for this is specific, and unless there's other factors, the lowest tender would be the awarded successful project builder. So,
but just for clarity, we do have a local a policy around local bids, and I believe it's like a difference of $5,000 or something like that.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I specifically for that, I'd have to go and look specifically, but I believe that in this case, it isn't applicable for this. So,
yeah, I'm assuming it's outside of this amount, but I know we do have a policy, and I think it's $5,000, but could be off by a bit. Councillor Haggard.
Yeah, I was just going to say that if we take that policy that we only want local contractors to take on local work, then every other community would do that as well. So that would prevent Bowerman from putting in bids and any other community. So at the end of the day, it may hurt him more than help him. So what we need to do, though, social procurement is not just about hiring a local contractor. It's about what are they leaving in the community? Are they hiring youth? Are they hiring women? Are they hiring any apprentices? Are they going to maybe leave a playground? Those kinds of things is what social procurement is not just getting a local contractor. And the social procurement policy is they consider local Vancouver Island. So thank you. While we're talking about social procurement, though, I was going to mention to Andrew that we should start working on a social procurement policy, perhaps. I know when we joined the committee, it was early when you first started with the city. So you've been here for about a year, you've settled in, so hopefully you can start working on that soon. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you. Andrew.
Yeah, so Madam Mayor, just to follow up on the local vendor preference, the amount is $1,000, but understanding that there is the Trade Investment and Labor Mobility Agreement, TILMA, that requires anything over $75,000 not to be applicable in this situation, which this is. So,
Perfect. Thank you very much for clarifying. And Councillor Haggard, thanks for your comments around social procurement. I think that is something we've been talking about implementing a more local policy for a while, and I think it's definitely time to, especially with COVID and wanting to get as much benefit to our community as possible and make sure people in our community are benefiting as much as possible in these situations. It's definitely the time to turn our minds to that. Okay, with that we have, we have not read the motion yet. Councillor Haggard, would you like to read the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move that council award the contract for the Coal Creek Sewer Separation Project to Luco Construction, Inc. for the tender price of $1,706,137.59, includes GST.
Thank you.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Poon. Any final comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to item number 5 from the Director of Development Services and the Deputy CAO, 32023 Kingsway Avenue, an update on the building permit activities and renovations. Councillor Poon.
Thank you. I'd like to recuse myself and based on having recused myself in the past on this matter.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll just wait until you're put in the virtual waiting room. Okay, perfect. Scott, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. So this report provides an update to Council on, based on a letter from a member of the public regarding permits and status of work at the building at 3203 Kingsway Avenue. A previous report was provided to Council in April of 2020, and this report follows up on that and builds on that report. So I'll kind of start where that one left off, and then I can answer any questions. So in April of 2020, the city, on April 3rd, the city did receive a building permit application from the owner for replacing, altering plumbing, renovation of suites, and some structural alterations. Also in April, the city received what's called letters of assurance from a professional engineer for structural work that was related to that building permit application. And under letters of assurance, that essentially means that the engineer is taking full responsibility for that structural work and provides field reviews to the building inspector and the city for any work that is being overseen. A building permit was issued by the city in May of 2020 with, as I said, with all the structural work under the supervision of the engineer. The owner has 2 years to complete work under a building permit. That's standard throughout. The engineer did do some structural work was done under the engineer's supervision in July of 2020 as it related to the building permit application. The city was also advised by the property owner that they had hired an architect to prepare further plans for further work in the building. The architect has not yet attended the site due to COVID, and so that has delayed the work. When and if the city does receive, or when the city receives plans from an architect, it is likely an additional building permit will be required. But at this stage, no further work has been undertaken due to the COVID pandemic. And that is the update that I could provide Council, and I'd be pleased to try and answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from Council? Okay, so my question is, what is our standard process if we're obviously not at that point yet, but if a permit is taken out and the 2 years lapses and the work is not completed, or it's under construction, is there a process that the city goes through at that point?
An applicant would be able to apply to renew the building permit, or they could take a whole new one depending on if the work had. So for instance, if the architect in question here comes up with a series of new work that's not covered by the current permit, that would be an additional building permit. But for the current permit, the applicant, as anyone does, is able to apply for a renewal if that work is still, hasn't been completed by that 2-year timeline.
Okay. And the current status is just, and while this work is underway, and I believe there was a stop work order and that was lifted. But at this point I think I'm just wondering, can the public feel comfort in the fact that any work done will be supervised as part of the letter of assurance, and that currently people are not coming and going from there? I'm wondering, I guess, what is if a renovation happens over an extended period of time in a just regular normal situation, is there any risk that the work doesn't get done and the building is then unsafe? I guess I'm wondering.
So I have no information that the building is unsafe in any manner. The structural work is being supervised by that engineer who has taken responsibility, and some structural work was done in July of 2020. And so now any inspection, any work that is done, for instance, that the structural engineer isn't covering, would require our building inspector to attend. So if there was a plumbing, some plumbing work that was done, we'd be at the property owner would need to call for an inspection, or the plumber would often call for an inspection. But in the same vein, if the architect does submit new plans, it is most likely that the architect will take responsibility for components, if not all portions of the work. Often you will see an architect be what's called the coordinating professional. So they will often take over the entire project, and they will coordinate other professionals such as engineers, mechanical, electrical, and that sort of thing, which is pretty, fairly common.
Thank you. I've heard concerns in the community that the work is not complete yet, and just wanting to understand, if that is normal, basically, that work has been started and now it does appear to be paused. What I'm hearing is that this is a very normal situation in that sense, that work is being supervised, and that we have assurance that it is being supervised to be done properly, and it's permitted to still be going on at this point.
Certainly, I think it's normal for construction to often take extended periods of time, especially when you're renovating an older building. And of course, COVID has certainly added a whole other level of complexity to projects.
Absolutely. Thank you. Are there any other questions from council? Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Smith, can you sort of enlighten the public of when do you need a permit? Like, if you're going to take the drywall out of your bedroom and put new drywall in, of course you need a permit. But at what stage does the regular Joe need a permit?
So I'm not a building inspector. So if someone thinks they need a permit or questions whether they need a permit, they should get in touch with the city to see if the work that they're proposing to do does require a permit. There are certainly lots of things that don't need building permits. Re-roofing your home does not require a building permit. A lot of things like that. But if there's ever a question by the public about whether they think they need a permit or not, I would encourage them to reach out to us, because I'd rather them ask ahead of time about if they do. But you're right, there's a variety of things that don't require permits.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's a great question. And I know that we have talked about preparing some kind of basic videos for people to understand some of these questions. And at the end of the day, I do know that, obviously contractors are informed and know what they're doing, and not commenting on this situation at all, but just generally on permits. I talk to a lot of members of the public who are not clear on when a permit is required and when it is not. And the average person in the public probably often does it work without a permit that maybe does cross a line because they don't realize. So I know we have talked about making some kind of educational videos to help people understand when a permit is required, and when it is, that it's quite a simple process to get one, and help them through that process. I think that most of the big renovations in our community are being done by professionals, and so we can have confidence in that. But I know we all hear of situations occasionally where we could work with people sooner if they just reach out to the city. So that's definitely the encouraged thing to do if people have questions. Councillor Solda.
But just to be clear on this particular project, this was done before COVID, some of the renovations. So we can't just blame everything on COVID, because the renovation started, I believe, before COVID. Is that not correct?
I think based on the timeline that they did, and I don't think that the intent here was to blame anything on COVID, just that the renovations may be taking longer for that reason, which is certainly, the renovations are taking longer right now because it's challenging to arrange contractors because the construction market is so busy. But I don't think anything is being blamed on COVID here. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I do know that we had a comment from a member of the public that Director of Corporate Services was going to read.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, just on behalf of Mr. Anderson, who has an interest in this topic, he just wanted me to share with council that he may wish to follow up with a reply at a future meeting of council or appear as a delegation.
Thank you very much. And it looks like this report, it says, is just being provided for council's information, so no motion needed. Councillor Washington?
Sorry, Madam Mayor, but what is there a penalty? Like if my neighbor started building something and then I'm going, hey, he needs a permit, and somebody comes in and says, yeah, you do need a permit. Is there a penalty for starting something without a permit?
Good question. Scott?
There possibly could be, but in most instances, our first effort is to get people to voluntarily comply. So if we discover that something, or we're informed that construction has started and there isn't a permit, we would attend. We would make a determination on whether a permit is or isn't required, and if a permit is required, we'd say you need to apply for a permit. Please stop all your work. And if someone applies and makes that honest effort, we're unlikely to issue them a ticket.
And sorry, Madam Mayor, building permits, are they $100 or $20 or? I know it depends on how big a structure you're going to do, but like,
it's based on the value of construction. So our building, the way building permits are based, how much the permit is based on the value of construction, but then it also gets a little more complex in that sometimes the number of plumbing fixtures also incorporates into the cost. And then there's actually a discount where professionals are engaged, where an architect or an engineer is engaged. There's a small discount for the building permit fees. So it varies widely, but it's based on the actual value of construction.
Thank you very much. I know we went somewhat off topic, but this is something that is, an area of interest for the public because there's a lot of renovations going on right now and in the community and new constructions, of course. And I think the more we can talk about what's required and the process, if you might be out of compliance or you're not sure what to do, the more people will help in the public make sure they do stay on the right track. So thank you for taking the time. And we'll move on to our next item, which is from the Director of Finance, BC Transit Annual Operating Agreement for 2021 to 2022. Go ahead, Andrew.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So what we have in front of council today is the annual operating agreement with BC Transit. So we normally bring this report and the agreement to council this time of year after the budget's been approved for BC Transit, and we can enter into this agreement. So what we have here today is also within the financial plan for 2021 to 2025, and all the financial implications are included in the financial plan for this agreement. What we should note is that the Safe Restart grant that was provided to municipalities that operate BC Transit across BC was provided to enable the safe delivery of service for BC Transit and continue on through the pandemic. Obviously, with ridership down and the likelihood that ridership will remain down for the next little while, those were all included in there. And there was also the provision to use our operating reserve funds from BC Transit that are held by BC Transit, but are used for operating needs year to year. So those funds help supported bringing in a financial plan, a change that adjusted the amount that is required downwards for BC Transit within the annual financial plan. So with that, councils can consider this agreement and proceed with the annual operating agreement if that's concurrence.
Thank you, Andrew. Are there questions from council on this? Okay. Councillor Haggard, would you like to read the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move that the Mayor and Director of Corporate Services be authorized to execute the BC Transit 2021-2022 annual operating agreement between the City of Port Alberni and British Columbia Transit as attached to this report and in effect from April 1st, 2021 to March 31st, 2022.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Solda. Seeing no comments on this, all in favor? Carried, thank you. And next we have from the Director of Engineering and Public Works, the intersection safety improvement options for 10th Avenue and Dunbar Street. And I think we'll have Rob popping up here.
Sorry, I keep losing the icon to turn myself on.
Oh, that's all right. Go ahead.
Keeps hiding on me. Thank you, Your Worship. Council requested a report regarding the safety improvement options for the intersection of 10th and Dunbar. The city and ICBC partnered on a network screening study to prioritize intersections for safety improvements. That study is still scheduled to be completed in July. At the same time as that study that we've started, we have engaged a transportation engineer to look at the intersections that we already had identified, such as 10th and Dunbar and 10th and Redford. The engineer is working on that. He just received the survey data. We had our staff go out and survey those intersections a couple of weeks ago. And he's expecting to have some preliminary results or recommendations to us in about 2 to 3 weeks from now. And at this time, we don't have anything preliminary, anything to show council, but we anticipate in probably 2 council meetings, we'll be able to get a report to council and give them an update on how that's going.
Okay, thank you. That's great. Happy to hear that intersection was already on the radar for intersections to be looked at. I think we all, especially when we see, you know, it was just a tragic situation that happened at that intersection. Especially when we see something like that, we certainly want to take a look and see if there's changes that can be made. Council, are there any questions at this point? Councillor Haggard.
No question, just a comment, but I really wanted to thank staff for taking these concerns from our community so seriously and acting on these comments and concerns so quickly. So thank you, staff, and also to the public. As the mayor said earlier, when you do send in these concerns, we do take them very seriously and we do look into them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, 2 points. One, and I suspect you'll look at this when you look at the intersection, but if you're traveling south to north along 10th Avenue, you'll notice that the bike lane actually ends on Anderson. So, or pardon me, on Argyle. So we have to somehow figure out a way of bikes crossing the dip in a safe manner. I personally ride through there on my bike and I'm always a little bit nervous as I'm going downhill and cars are turning up Dunbar. That's one thing. The other thing, which is to this day on the low side of Dunbar, there's a light that emits that orange light. Yet I get calls from residents that have had lights put in front of their house that you can see from the moon. So I don't know if Rob, if you're hearing that very often, but I've heard from several people now that these new lights in certain locations are overly bright. And then the flip side to that is maybe where they should be, such as 10th and Dunbar, they haven't been replaced as of yet.
If I may counsel or answer your worship. Whew. I having a problem with English today. On the first matter, we're definitely looking at this intersection in 10th and Redford where the bike lanes at both intersections stop. And we're looking, that's why we went and surveyed topographic survey of the intersections to see if we have enough room to either continue the bike lanes through or put some kind of lane, as you see in some municipalities, the green lane with the dashed line. So it's visual notice to the cars that you're sharing that lane, as well as the green area directs the cyclists to stay in that area. So then they can kind of share the intersection. So we're looking at options such as that. To your other point about the lights, we actually have been going through a program of replacing a lot of our high pressure sodium lights with LEDs. And we tried as much as possible to continue the same level of light and the same kind of color, because LEDs can tend to be very brighter. They seem brighter and lighter because they're so white. So we went through that process over, I think, the last 2 or 3 years. And what happens in some of the instances are the old lights have dimmed over time so much that when you put in a new light, even if it's similar to the previous light, it seems very, very bright. But we have been getting, I'd say, a few calls about them and what we can do in some instances for folks on, if the light is on their side of the street, we put a little shield on the back of the light so it isn't going right into their property if they're having an issue with it coming into their windows. So I welcome anyone out there who believes that their light is too bright and it's coming into their house to contact Public Works, and we'll go out and take a look at it.
Go ahead, Councillor Corbia.
If I may, Madam Mayor. And back on the bike path, I've never been a huge fan of those bike lanes, but it just, you know, if you were to go up one block to 11th, there's hardly a car on that road. And I've always questioned why we're not using the quiet side streets a little bit more. And then along Dunbar, on the north side of Dunbar, you've got a lot of green space where you could actually build a bike lane and somehow incorporate that into the sidewalk and cross the dip. But I see that a lot in Vancouver, where they would move you over to a side street instead of trying to fight the traffic on these busy streets. So something maybe to keep in mind. Thank you.
If I may, Your Worship, on that later in the meeting today, when we talk about active transportation planning, I'll talk a bit more about that, but it's definitely something where we want to engage a professional and look at some of the areas where we have the sharrows, where there's the share the road with the cyclists, where you might want a bike lane, or look at 6th Avenue, for instance, where there's a huge road and it's a lot quieter than 10th. So maybe put the bike lines there. So we're definitely looking throughout the whole community on what the best facility is in each location. So we'll talk about that in a bit.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, okay, we will move on. That was just a report for information. Item number 8 from the Director of Engineering and Public Works, we have the UBCM Active Transportation Planning 2021 grant application.
Thank you, Your Worship. We have applied for, we're wanting to apply for a grant. The deadline is actually May 21st, so that's coming up fairly quickly. The grant is for $20,000 to support active transportation planning. So it isn't for an active transportation plan per se, but it's perfect for us this year where we're proceeding with an official community plan. And this grant would support a transportation engineer incorporating that in the official community plan process. So we would look at working sessions with senior staff and council and looking at active transportation, as well as online engagement of the community and stakeholder groups, and facilitate some design guidelines where we look at what is the right facility, a multi-use path, a bike lane, or in some instances just a trail, or in quieter streets, maybe it's just a shared street or shared space as they call them with the sign. So the $20,000 will really support and enhance our official community plan by enabling us to talk to the various stakeholders in the community and really look at some of these issues. Because when we painted those bike lanes was quite some years ago, and over time, the industry has seen some really good statistics that have changed a little bit of philosophy over the last 5-8 years into what you put where and how you paint it even and where you paint it. So it'd be nice to revisit that. And we're putting off repainting our bike lanes right now just for that process. So we can look at that hopefully in the next month or so with the engineer to make some decisions on those lanes.
Thank you. Councillor Solda.
So I have a question. I have no problem about the applying for this grant, but I do have questions about contacting with the public. There's seniors out there who are not on computer and they need to have their 2 cents worth, and people with disabilities need to be able to communicate. And it would be great if some of the stakeholders were contacted in a different way, because those two elements, these people need some kind of communication, and it's not necessarily through the computer. Thank you.
If I may, Your Worship, we talked to our consultant about that and about the current situation with COVID, and hopefully by this fall we're able to do more in person. But in the meantime, we talked about even setting up some stations where we could have separate people at one table and coordinate it, so you have one person come talk to them at a time. as well as in the past, I've done events where you'll say it's a walking group of seniors and you go walk with them. And so you walk with them for 10, 15 minutes and you keep your 2-meter separation. So then you can engage them and they'll pick a route. They'll like to show you some of the concerns they have, which is a great opportunity to see what they see. And you can do that with other vulnerable groups as well as schools and try to maintain that distance and do smaller groups.
Thank you. And the great place for finding these people are actually around the track, the dike, and the waterfront is where a lot of people walk. Thank you.
Interesting. Thank you. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I know people in our community hate our bike lanes, but right now you can't buy a bike. There's a waiting list to get a bike. So it is a way of the future. People are using bikes. So I'm really pleased to hear that we're moving in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just add that I am usually someone who is frustrated by taking on additional planning reports when it feels like we don't always pursue the initiatives out of the reports. But I have to say that the active transportation report that was done, it was done just before I was elected to council. So probably 2013. It is a report that has had much implemented out of it. And, you've seen that with the creation of the bike lanes. And while they may not be the best bike lanes, or they may not be through all areas of the community, they were absolutely a start. It came from that report. And I think that our community has changed a great deal in that time. So I'm really looking forward to working through a further reaching and more a more thorough version of that report, where we do look at not just painted bike lanes on the road, but is it walking paths, is it trails, having more and more of these connections, community connections built into our community and long term. And I know that council's always thinking about what pieces of property we need for for transportation connections and corridors of the future. And having a report like this done that is really the next phase of where the community is going, I think will be incredibly valuable. So I'm really looking forward to hopefully getting this grant and doing the work. With that, Councillor Solda, go ahead, and then if you want to read the motion as well.
Just a quick comment, Madam Mayor. I've never been a big lover of the bike lanes because I hardly see people riding on those lanes, because we do have White Street. And when my kids were younger, we used to, 6 of us would be riding on the side of the road. So I will be very interested to see what the study comes up with as well. And I do understand that it's really hard to buy bikes right now. And anyway, so Madam Mayor, with that, I'll read that the council directs staff to prepare a report. Oh no, wrong one. That I'm on the wrong thing here. Let me just move up.
It's just the top of
Madam Mayor, yeah. I move that the Council for the City of Port Alberni authorize staff to apply for funding to the UBCM Active Transportation Plan Grant Program in the amount of $20,000 in advance of the deadline date of May 21st, 2021. Thank you.
Second,
Thank
Madam
you very
Mayor.
much. Seconded by Councillor Corbeil. Any further comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Sorry, any opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay, moving on to bylaws. We have one item from the Director of Corporate Services, City of Port Alberni Lane and Road Closure Removal and Dedication Bylaw number 5026, 2021.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this is just before council. You will recall that you gave 3 readings to this lane road closure bylaw at your previous meeting. We were subject to advertising per legislation, which we did. No written submissions or requests to hear representations to council were received. So council may now consider final adoption.
Thank you. Would somebody like to read this motion? Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the City of Port Alberni Lane road closures and removal of dedication bylaw number 5026, 2021 be now finally adopted, signed by the mayor and the corporate officer, and numbered 5026.
Second.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Poon. Any comments on this one? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And on to correspondence for action. We have a few items. Item number 1 is an email received May 3rd, 2021 from Mark Anson, president of Reapply Design and Research Incorporated, requesting a letter of support from the city for an application to the BC Accelerating Manufacturing Scale-Up Grant Program. Are there questions on this? Councillor Corbeil.
I'm just curious, what does this fella do? What is this Reapply Wood Design and Research?
Okay, we'll see if, Pat, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Councillor Corbeil, this company is cutting hemlock wood on a diagonal to reduce the amount of warping that's in it. And they've also adopted a process for coloring it, laminating it, and they are producing, at the moment, they're producing wood for walls and ceilings, and they're starting to explore wood for floors as well. The wood's very colorful and is attracting a lot of attention in the marketplace.
That's great. Thank you. Councillor Corbeil, would you like to read the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd be pleased to move that the council direct staff to prepare a letter of support to Reapply Wood Design and Research Incorporated to accompany their application to the BC Accelerating Manufacturing Scale-Up Grant Program.
Second.
Moved and seconded. And I should have asked Pat, but I believe this is the business that is just on 2nd Avenue and started up in the community a couple of years ago. Am I right on that, Pat?
Yes, you are, Madam Mayor. They are just down the street from corner of Argyle and 2nd. And they've been installing 12 machines in the building, some of which are specially designed by them. And they will be, they've actually done a production run, but they are will be gearing up to go here pretty quick.
Okay, wonderful. Very exciting. So on the motion, all in, oh, sorry. Councillor Haggard, go ahead.
I was just going to make a comment. I think this is a really great example of creating high value for forestry products. And anything that we can do to support small business, I'm in support of.
Absolutely, and it's always nice to see, businesses from other communities, starting in other communities, but coming to Port Alberni and setting up, their manufacturing, and so really exciting, and wishing them luck for sure. So on the motion to prepare a letter of support, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you. And item number 2 is a letter dated May 3rd, 2021 from Roland Smith regarding the Dry Creek Trail and the proposed Connect the Keys project. Council, are there any questions on this letter? Okay. So I just have a comment. Actually, this letter goes into a lot of detail, and I know that staff is suggesting a report to give some answers to some of the specific questions, but the bulk of this letter really speaks to, the need for asset management. And I have to thank Roland for writing this letter. When I read it the first time, I thought, oh, goodness, it's frustrating to see some of the areas where we haven't planned and managed our assets as well as we should have in the past. And at the same time, I started thinking about, is this our current practice now? And I have to say that I think that this is not our current practice. I think that we are doing better than this going forward. Of course, we're working on our asset management plan. But beyond that, a few situations really stand out to me. One being that we applied for $1 million grant recently to finish the Roger Creek Trail system. And when we did that, we specifically put in our budget ongoing maintenance for that trail. And I think that there's a really excellent point being made here that we shouldn't just keep creating assets if we're not going to realistically understand the cost of that asset going forward. We can't continue to build assets and have them fall apart, 5 years after they're built. But I know that that's not the intent of this council. So I do want to thank Roland, although it's always kind of, it's always kind of disappointing when you read something like this and do recognize the shortcomings of some of the projects that have been taken on in the past and how, we maybe didn't maintain them as we intended to. I do believe that that's not how we are planning to move forward. And we are showing that in a few ways, our sewer and water systems and the asset management plan that happened there and the ongoing work with, increased or with the amount of infrastructure that we're renewing there each year, I think is another really great example of how we're trying to manage our assets properly. So Roland, I'm sure you're listening. Thank you for staying on us about this. I know I know it's challenging sometimes to write these letters as well, but I do think it's important for us to receive them and keep, being reminded of how important this is. But I also feel very strongly that this is not how we are going to move forward. And I think that Roger Creek Trail project and how we have been, looking specifically in our strategic plan speaks to increasing parks maintenance project or workers as we increase the parks assets that we have as well. So we're very aware of this and hopefully we'll not receive letters like this in the future because members of the public will see the assets that we create being maintained. Are there any other comments? Okay, seeing none, then I will move that council direct staff to prepare a report in response to Mr. Roland Smith's inquiries as outlined in a letter dated May 3rd, 2021 regarding the Dry Creek Trail and the proposed Connect the Keys project. Is there a seconder?
Second.
Seconded by Councillor. Seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried, thank you. And next we'll move on to proclamations. Item number 1 is Economic Development Week. And I am going to invite Pat Deacon, our Economic Development Manager, to speak about Economic Development Week. But I do want to first just recognize Pat, that our Economic Development Manager is actually the chairperson of the British Columbia Economic Development Association. And he works alongside Trevor Coots from Huayet First Nation, who is the association's secretary. So I just want to say, Pat, we are really fortunate to have you in our organization and also working at a provincial level with some of the leaders in economic development, really just, looking at what is best practice and what works and what's going to move our community forward. So we're very happy to have you doing that provincial work as well and proud to have you in our organization. And I'll pass it over to you now, Pat.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Much appreciated. It is Economic Development Week, and I did forward a newsletter to Council, and that letter is from the BC Economic Development Association, and it contains one opportunity each day this week for us to advance our understanding of the economic development field. And in particular, I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that there is a town hall meeting with Minister Kalan this coming Friday from 11 to noon. And each of the events are free. There is an opportunity to register. If any member of council is wanting to register for the town hall, please click on sponsor because that will allow you to register for free. And I'm also happy to take this opportunity both to report that the BC Economic Development Association and Executive Pulse are assisting our small business support specialists who are calling every business in the community by inputting the questionnaire or the survey that we have developed. so they can stop using Excel or just a hard copy form, and will allow us to track this through time. And finally, I'm here to say that economic development is a team sport. And as such, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank council, my municipal colleagues, and my peers at Community Futures, the Chamber of Commerce, the Port Authority, and the First Nations for their own work in support of business retention, business attraction, and diversification of the economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pat. And would somebody like to move as well that we proclaim May 9th to 15th, 2021 as Economic Development Week? Moved by Councillor Haggard, seconded by Councillor Paulson. All in favor? Carried. Wonderful. Thanks very much for that, Pat. And item number 2 from Literacy Alberni Society, an email dated May 6th, 2021, requesting that council proclaim the week of May 23rd to 29th, 2021 as Anti-Racism Awareness Week. Would somebody like to make that motion? Councillor Solda?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Paulson. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, carried. And on to correspondence for information. Twyla.
Thank you. So council in your package has the summary for May 10th. On it, there's 8 items. The first 2 items are separate letters from residents, and as council is aware, staff reports were on the agenda at today's meeting addressing those 2 items. We have 4 letters from other levels of government, 2 generally looking for support for environmental components, and the other 2 relating to vulnerable population. Then we also have a letter from Leslie Walleris, and that was just following up with the awarding of tender for the McLean Mill, and a letter from the Government Finance Officers Association informing the city that the Canadian Award for Financial Reporting has been awarded to the city for its financial reporting process. And Andrew could touch on that further if council so wishes.
Thank you. Council, are there any questions or comments on the items today? Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Following up to Leslie Walleris' letter, I was wondering if the Director of Corporate Services could let the public know how the council is informed of when letters are sent to City Hall. She's saying that we had lots of time to review and do research, when in actuality, we did not receive that letter until the agenda package came out. So can you just talk about that if you don't mind, Twyla?
No, not at all. And that's correct, Councillor Haggard. Typically, if we receive letters that are addressed to council, and in this case, there was a staff report that was going to accompany the April 3rd letter, staff will hold that letter back until the report is able to be provided and included with the letter, so council receives it as a complete package.
Thank you very much. I'd also like to comment on that letter because the letter does go into some detail and make some comments about our CAO and council, not taking action or asking questions. And I just want to state for the record that our CAO, as an employee of this organization, if there are any conversations going on about personnel matters, that our CAO has the right for those conversations, just as any other employee does in our organization, to have those conversations happen in camera and an in-camera private meeting. So those conversations would absolutely never happen in public, just as they wouldn't for any other employee. So I think that's important to state. This letter, I think, leads us to believe that we would be having those conversations in public, and that would just be completely inappropriate. Any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, would somebody like to move receipt of the correspondence for information?
I'll move receipt.
Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Solda. Seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried, thank you. No report from in camera today, so on to council reports. And any items councillors would like to highlight? Councillor Paulson.
I just thought I'd very quickly comment on the presentation made by by Stefan Yancey, the operations manager for highways in Central Island. Just so people are prepared, there's going to be some major repair work at the bottom of the hump on the east side in the S curves in June. So be patient, be happy. There's probably going to be a couple or 3 weeks where we might be grumpy going through there because of construction. But yeah, just thought I'd throw that in there. Be prepared.
Thank you, and I'll just add to that as well that when Stefan did present to the regional district on some of the projects from Ministry of Transportation happening in our area, he did talk as well about the planning work that is going to hopefully be getting underway reasonably soon for the Beaver Creek and River Road intersection. And as the public is aware, this is an area that we've been advocating strongly to the provincial government at UBCM the last 2 years, as well as our staff working really closely with them on the need for improvements at that intersection. So we are really grateful to the province that they are taking those requests we're making seriously and are going to be doing some survey and preliminary design work on that project to look at what options are to move forward and hopefully address that intersection, because it certainly can be a big problem for people coming and going from that area. Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Was there any discussion regarding the parking lot down at Cathedral Grove, perchance?
Yes, Councillor Paulson, do you want to comment on that at all?
Well, his comment to us in there, and there was no detail, there was no concept drawings or anything, but his comment is that the Cathedral Grove design process has been finalized, and they will still be coming back to public engagement sessions probably in June and July of this year. I'm not sure that work would proceed in 2021, but the design process, the original public engagement has been done, the design process has been done, and now they will come back to us for feedback on the 1 or 2 options. Maybe there's only one option, but that process is finished, and I think we can look forward to something positive happening in that area here in the next month or 2.
Thank you. And council, I didn't write a report, but I did just want to highlight a couple items from meetings in the last couple of weeks that just wanted to quickly comment on. One meeting I had was just an introductory meeting with the new president of North Island College. So just wanted to welcome Lisa DeMoe to that position, and really productive meeting on kind of what their vision is for North Island College and the Port Alberni campus, and really appreciate that she took the time and her interest in expanding the program offerings. She asked if I had any community feedback about programs that were needed. And one that has come up for us many times is an aviation type program. Aviation technician is run out of Campbell River, but of course we've got Colson's out at the airport doing, leading in technology in that industry. So talked about that, talked about childcare programs, human service programs, increasing the trades programs in the Valley, and really just a lot of, different ideas and potential. But she's very focused on our area, and really appreciated just her knowledge of what the Port Alberni campus could be, and her vision on that. Also had a really good meeting with the newer chair of the Port Authority, and we talked about just ways that our City of Port Alberni and the Port Authority could work together more regularly at a board to council level. So hopefully we'll be having a council to board meeting in the near future as soon as we're able to with COVID. We used to do that, and one of the things that has gotten more challenging through COVID is the ability to meet in groups, of course, and I think we've lost that a bit, lost some of the connection through not being able to have those regular meetings. So we are hoping to talk about more regular meetings as a whole group, and then possibly a smaller group of a couple councillors and Port Authority members as well. So definitely a lot of overlaps in the work that's going on in our community, but the more communication we can have, the better. And that is all I want to highlight. Any other items from council reports?
I always like to tease the mayor about her lack of a written report, because I know that you have 8 broken fingers and can't type right now.
Can't do it. Can't do it. Thank you, Councillor Paulson. But thank you for submitting yours, I'm sure. All right, with that, would somebody like to move receipt of council reports? Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Paulson, all in favor? Carried, thank you. And are there any items of new business? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to question period. Do we have any questions today?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So we do have Mr. Anderson, who is in our waiting room. So Sarah will bring him in.
Great.
And then I do have a written question submitted.
Sure. Okay, it looks like Mr. Anderson is just connecting to audio. We'll just give him a minute for that. I'm wondering if he hasn't clicked the connect to audio button. I think he can see us.
So perhaps I should move on to the submitted written question, and we'll see if we can get Mr. Anderson. Oh. No.
Okay. It came up with a note that said did not connect.
Okay, so this, we have a written question that was submitted from Mr. Smith. And he's noting on the city's website, there is a notice that says city comments on staff conduct dated January 6th, 2021. This relates, sorry, I got my screen. This relates to the animated discussion between one of the city's bylaw officers and Randy Brown outside the old CJAV building. The city made a statement regarding this employee not modeling the behavior or meeting the standards expected by the city by employees. Why has there been no statement issued by the city for the error in judgment by the CAO?
Okay.
January 6th, 2021. This relates.
I think we have an echo happening now.
Relates to the animated discussion between one of the city's bylaw officers and. Not sure what's happening here.
I think so. Mr. Anderson, could you hear us now?
I can. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, wonderful. We can hear you. We are happy to have you on.
I am teachable.
Hey, it's not easy getting on these calls. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay, I hope you give me a little bit of grace here. This won't take very long, because as Caitlin expressed, and thanks Caitlin for speaking on my behalf, I expected to be able to comment at the meeting. I guess the first question I got is, I understood, right or wrong, if a topic is brought forward under reports, a member of the public who has corresponded with the city on the issue could speak on that issue during the report. Now, I'm informed by Caitlin, and I'm sure she's right, that this is not the case. Has this policy changed recently? And if so, why? Because I seem to remember that you were able to be active in the conversation, or have expressed some feelings about the report.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. I will go to Twyla to answer that question.
Oh, did I say Caitlin?
Yeah.
You did, but that's okay.
Sorry, Twyla.
No, that's okay. Thank you, Mayor Minions, and thank you, Mr. Anderson. And what I did express to Mr. Anderson, unlike a development variance permit or that sort of process where you do engage with the applicant at the report writing time or those submissions from members of the public, in this particular instance, Mr. Anderson's opportunity to speak to council would be the public input portion or the questions. Now, in Mr. Anderson, that wasn't, you can't really comment on a report after hearing the conversation from council. So that was the situation in this regard. So Mr. Anderson now is here at the question period, but it is somewhat limiting, as council knows, the way the procedure bylaw is currently written.
Thank you. And I just wanted to add to that as well, Mr. Anderson, that other situations where you may have experience being able to participate more right at report level would be during our committee of the whole meetings, where we do have a different procedures bylaw that guides those meetings. So, but the policy has not changed, or the bylaw has not changed.
Okay, so may I make a comment? I know it would be appreciated. This report and a question. This report encompasses several documents and references other information going back to 2020, and as it should. I mean, the full scope. It, however, excludes relevant information that properly reflects the seriousness of this non-compliance matter that's never been brought forward to the public in the proper manner for various reasons, which I will not get into. Just to touch part of my concern is in the discussion today, which was interesting, and Scott had mentioned, and welcome back, Scott. What you contribute. I agree with everything you said and the process, etc. However, the issues that bother me is WorkSafe BC on April 14th, I think was the first, but in 2020, April 6, 2020, and April 20th, in their second report, it was reopened, was told by Ms. Spoon that all work in the building was complete, all work. And council, I believe yourself as well, recently has said that they've seen pictures of the rooms upstairs and they're beautiful, they're wonderful, which I'm glad to hear. And so why is there an architect now being brought in to lay out plans and work that's being completed? The same thing applies with asbestos. And I got 6 folders of various issues that could take a half an hour to an hour to go through and point out issues like this. There's so many inconsistencies that's why I won't let go of this. The timelines don't match. And someone is not being forthright and honest, and I think the public needs to know. So my question, I'm sort of getting around to that, is when I requested an opportunity to bring forward this case, so it's out in the open, all council members run on total honesty and forthrightness as far as the issues that are brought forward as in their tenure. The public needs to know what's going on at the Kingsway and the major things that took place that actually, as reflected in the reports by WoodSafe, has put people's well-being and health in danger. When they did the asbestos report, and this is as far as I'm going, because I'm starting to talk on the thing. When they did the asbestos report, that was done over 2 years after the initial breakdown of the old building took place. The asbestos were gone. That's why they closed the first case. They opened the second when I provided undisputable proof that it was not the case. That was not the case, that the work was all completed. So there's a lot of stuff that has not been brought forward that should be, and council should be as eager as I am to make sure that we address this issue. And by doing that, future people they'll be taking their permits out. And so I'm not going to go beyond that. Thank you for allowing me to express that, because and I guess my question is, do you foresee any problems with me having some time to provide my report on the issues as I see them? And of course, a big question period. Can I do it in 10 minutes? It would take me 2 hours, but I know on that I'm not going to get that. So I just would like a commitment from yourself, Mayor, and the council that we can work something out so we can deal with this situation, get clarity, and move on.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. And I will commit that you have, the right as any other member of the public to book to be a delegation. And it's not for us to choose whether we like a topic or don't like a topic. You have a right to be a delegation. So if that's your intent, and staff will do the best that they can to answer your questions. I don't want to get into details because, I don't have details in front of me, obviously. As you're talking, we're not looking at the same things, but I appreciate that your intent is to, make sure that this kind of thing does not happen again. And we want to make sure that everyone is held accountable, and council shares that with you.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Okay, bye now.
Okay. With that, assuming we have no other public input, would somebody like to move adjournment? Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Corbeil. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And council, if you could just hold where we are for a moment.